welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. This is the first podcast I'm recording in the new year, so I hope you're all enjoying 2025 so far. Today, I am here with an amazing author whose book I spent the first days of the year reading, and I am so excited to talk about this book now. So let's get into it. Hello, welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Sure. So my name is Shannon Ives. I'm a, dark historical fantasy writer. I live in southern Vermont, and my book is called Those Fatal Flowers, and it is essentially a mashup of the sirens from Greco-Roman mythology and the Roanoke colony from early American history, with a lot of feminine rage baked in between.
You like when I got the email about this book, like that pitch just like immediately bought in. It is so interesting. What like two interesting things to juxtapose and kind of have communicate with each other. Before I get too much into the book itself, could you tell us a little bit about your career as a writer, how you came to writing, and maybe like where this project started for you?
Sure. So this was kind of, to back up like all the way, I've always enjoyed writing. The first seeds of this story began in a high school creative writing class. And then it just kind of sat. I went to college. I actually studied anthropology instead of English. A anxiety disorder kind of kept me from pursuing writing as like a career option. And I was kind of under the impression that I I went to University of Iowa, and I think like they have an incredible writers workshop, but you can kind of forget that genre fiction exists. And so that's what I enjoy writing and reading, but somehow it never occurred to me that I could also write that. So I studied anthropology instead, and then transitioned to working in tech after college, and writing just kind of fell away until 2017, where I decided to try my hand at National Novel Writing Month. And that was really the first time I had picked up writing since, for all intents and purposes, I would say high school. I took like one or two creative writing classes in college, but like nothing really stuck there either. And the goal was just to try to have fun with it. And I picked this back up. It was a little bit after Trump got elected and the Me Too movement was in full swing, and I was feeling very angry and wasn't not too charitable towards the male gender. So the first version of this was pretty angry. A lot. I mean, this version is too, but like more so than this. My editor helped me kind of scale it back a little bit in a way that I think makes it more meaningful. But yeah, so I ended National Novel Writing Month with the first draft of this. It was a mess. And then I kind of just spent the next couple of years tinkering with it. And the goalposts just kept moving with the draft. So at first it was just to finish it. And then it was to finish it to a point where I was happy with it. And then it was kind of like, well, maybe I can just query it and see. And just along each step of the process, I got really lucky. I ended up getting an agent like from my agent on a Twitter pitch contest, I think in 2019, maybe 2020. But yeah, I just kind of like I just kept being in the right places at the right time. Got really lucky with this. So this is the first book that I wrote, and I know that that's not a standard experience, but I guess the gods and fate were smiling on me with this one. So
Wow, that's so interesting. And that's a really, interesting long time over which a project can evolve. I'm really curious actually about how maybe your undergraduate studies also shaped the project. Because I think I read online that did you study mythology in college as well, or?
I took a lot of magic and mythology classes, both in the anthro department, and I also minored in Latin. So that piece, I believe it was third year of Latin, we take a class called Golden Age of Roman Poetry, and there's a lot of Ovid in there. And Ovid's passage about the sirens is kind of what unlocked the backstory for Delia and her sisters in this book. So yeah, it was kind of just a story that like the pieces of it fell into place over several years. And then like once I had them all, I was ready to go, I guess. But it just took time for them to kind of organically bubble up. But absolutely, courses in college inspired this book a lot. I took a class called Human and Animal Sacrifice, which also played heavily here as well.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, and just like the confluence of your interest in mythology with like the timing of Me Too and yeah, the Trump administration and just how there's already so much rage in the myth and like that makes it a really good conduit for for exploring.
Yeah, it was therapeutic to write, I would say.
Oh my gosh. So could we talk a little bit about Thelia? Because I love her. Could you talk about shaping her character? Sort of I really love that she's complex and messy, like really messy. And
Yeah.
she's allowed to be like not just imperfect, but make, like be irrational at times and be rageful and angry. And I really loved getting to know her and sitting with her. So yeah, could you talk about shaping her?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes from I'm trying to think of how to word this. Like as women, especially in American society, I think we can have a lot of anger that gets tampered down, or we're not encouraged to express it or let it out. And I think she really struggles with the kind of seed of her character is that she's in love with Proserpina, who is the Roman equivalent of Persephone, and is there when Persephone gets abducted by Hades. So she and is maybe a little bit responsible or blames herself for being responsible by revealing her location to him in a moment of terror. And I think that that's something that I could feel like people can relate to in the sense of doing something that you didn't mean to do in a moment of panic, and then like that spiraling out of control and that grief over years, just kind of like eating you alive. That's what happens to her. But at the end of the day, she was a child when that occurred. So it takes her a long time to process that maybe it's not totally herself that she should be angry at, and probably more him. But yeah, I don't know. I think I just wanted to write a character that was as angry as I felt at that time. It felt justified then, and I think it was, which makes it interesting for her. Like she definitely makes decisions I would not make or recommend making, but like I wanted it to be understandable why she chooses to do what she does. And there is framework like from the existing myths too, like the sirens are monsters that lure sailors to their deaths, and I wanted to kind of explore why, because the myths always leave that out. It's just
Mhm.
like Odysseus sails past and there's a bunch of bones all over the beaches. Even in Ovid, they're given wings to find to try to find Persephone, but then it kind of that like what they do or why is skipped over until same thing, like oh now they're just these like horrific female creatures that exist only to torment men foolish enough to listen to their promises of the future.
Mm. Yeah, the book has a ton to say about uh power and violence, but specifically like structural violence, the ways in which
Mm-hmm.
like baked into our society and the way that men are socialized,
Yeah,
And the book made me think a lot about sort of like how it presents a lose-lose for women. Because I think a lot of what's
yeah,
with Thelia is that like so she has been traumatized by this like violation, and then she is further blamed for being traumatized and exhibiting
Yeah.
signs of trauma. And that is something that happens to women, I think, throughout time and throughout cultures. Yeah, so could you talk about sort of like the meditation on power and how violence operates there? I hope that's like not so huge, like unanswerable.
No, I'll try. I think in the beginning, through like the first half of the book, and like until Thelia actually like engages with some of the men on Roanoke, one in particular, she's so removed from them, like after being banished to this island, that she doesn't get a chance to see them like as really as people. And the one that she does, that's the catalyst for her being able to leave, is also kind of not kind of also sucks. So like it just further reinforces the idea that men are dangerous, and she doesn't get a chance to see that like maybe actually like it's not like an entire gender that's the problem. It's how like they're just being raised. So within that context, she and her sisters employ, I guess, a more traditional masculine violence and enact like physical atrocities against the sailors that land there. They butcher them, they eat them. Like it's kind of it's gnarly for sure. But I would say they're doing things that they have learned and seen, and it takes her leaving and actually like meeting other people, particularly one really awful woman, to learn that power, like it's not gender that's the problem. It's like power, and like unchecked power is what can corrupt a person to do awful things. And I think that's when she realizes like that in herself, like, oh, the monstrous body that I was given is also like a form of that awful power that I used in a traditionally masculine way to like dominate people. Does that make sense? I'm
100%.
or okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you brought up, yeah, the scenes in the past and the scenes in the present of the book, I'd love if we could talk to you about like the dual timelines. Um,
Yeah.
because I love the way that they are interwoven. I'm always curious about like how much work that takes, Do you have to spend a lot of time moving puzzle pieces around and like what shapes like the dialogue between time periods?
Yeah. So in the first draft, it was actually a linear story. And my husband, he was the English major, but between the two of us. So I sent him the draft, and we were both kind of just thinking about it. And at that point, I really liked the past sections more. So it was like all of that happened in the first half of the book. And then I was like, I feel like the ending is kind of, it feels disjointed. Like it's really weird. It felt like two separate stories. And I kind of looked at the arcs of each quote unquote half, and they kind of noticed that they kind of mirrored each other, but didn't want to say like what I feared in my heart the answer was, because I knew it was going to be a lot of work to enact it. And my husband John just off the cuff was like, what if you like interwove them and cut that, like did back to back? And I was like, darn, like oh darn, I think that's what this is supposed to be. So it took an external voice of reason to get me to try it. And then once I did, I was surprised. Like I was surprised at how well it felt. Like elements of each timeline mirrored each other or played off each other well. It just kind of felt like it worked. And then my editor helped me pick out spots even further where it was like, okay, this half should go in this part of the past because it'll really highlight like what's going on in the present over here. And sometimes you just need like someone removed from your brain to point out like, yeah, this will be better if we reorient things this way. I'm really glad that we gave it a shot because I like how they play off each other.
Yeah, it works so well in like two different ways, I think. So there's
Yeah.
a way that which like when you're dealing with, to some extent historical fiction, it's fun to explore like how time periods speak to each other, and how we are influenced by the past. But it works so much too for talking about like dealing with a traumatic history or coping
Mm-hmm.
with past trauma because it's something that you have to revisit whether you want to again and again, and it can be like intrusive, and I think it really mirrors her internal process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think, yeah, if it was all told, like if it stayed linearly, we wouldn't have those reflections on how she got to where she was when she's making some of the decisions that she's making in the present timeline. And I think it's helpful to have them close, like almost for reference, because like they're not, a lot of times they're not nice decisions. So I like, okay, this is where her brain is when she's deciding it's a good idea to try to lure like an entire colony of men back home to sacrifice them.
I think it's a really great technique for sort of like um maintaining empathy for I hate to use the word problematic, but for a complicated, messy character,
Yeah, definitely. She's complicated and messy. There's no questions about that.
And I also love the sort of the because you just mentioned like the stakes of why she's in Roanoke and what her mission there is. I love structuring something like with a ritual or with a task like that.
Mm-hmm.
Have like immediate stakes, of like, oh, you have this time frame and you have to do these things and achieve that. So could you talk about, while revealing what you are comfortable revealing, like how you structured like her mission, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so that also came in pieces. I knew from the short story I wrote in high school was essentially just the ritual scene where she turns human. I just thought that was like a really evocative image, and then I kind of needed to build a story around like, okay, why are they stuck here? Why do they need to get out? Like, what's going on? And then with Ovid, some of that fell into place. Like, oh, they were banished there after Proserpina got kidnapped, and so it just kind of flowed out over the months. I knew that the settlers had to be gone by a certain time because like another ship from the relief ship from England does make its way to Roanoke and find that it's abandoned, and all the like structures taken down, and unclear to them where those people went. So I was like, they need to be out of here. They need to be out of here before May. And then I knew that typically a lot of sea travel didn't happen in the winter because like the boats get incredibly wet. It's very cold. So there's kind of like a pause period. But like in the draft that my editor bought, it was like there wasn't a good reason for that. And that was one of the things that we worked on together. And the moon cycle, we tied it to the moon cycles. It was just sometimes I feel like when you're writing historical fiction, or stuff based in like mythology, these little like details just kind of emerge that make it feel like it was destined. And one of those was that Proserpina ate 6 pomegranate seeds. And so we have Delia given 6 moons in this new body to reflect like for one of each seed that she ate. So that was something that came through like in one of the fairly later drafts. But I think that having that countdown clock like does propel us forward in a way that like without it, it was definitely lagging a little bit.
Yeah, and it's so lovely because, you get to play with like a very grim, like realistic portrayal of a period of history that was like not fun for women or anybody, but like that
Yeah.
harsh and like you depict that and also get to play with that sort of mythology, like fairy tale logic and have that also in there. And it's so beautiful. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about it. And I'm very excited to recommend it to our patrons.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. One last thing before we go. What is on the horizon for you? Do you think you'll write more about mythology? What are your plans?
I'm not sure. My whims take me in a lot of strange directions. So right now, I'm working on editing a cosmic horror novel set in Nebraska during the Homestead Act, so 1866. So I think I do like playing with times in American history and adding like a speculative element to that. Just kind of depends on what genre like officially that will take. So this project I'm lovingly calling Little Lovecraft on the Prairie. We'll see. We'll see what happens there.
Amazing. Well, don't be surprised if I reach out to your publicist when that like is announced because that sounds super cool. So
Sounds good.
Right. All right. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. And please check out those fatal flowers. By the time that you hear this, it will be out in the world. So go to your favorite library, independent bookstore, online, wherever you like to go for your books. All right. It is now time to close this chapter. Goodbye.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.